All right, so this Knife Thoughts video is going to be a review of this knife, and this is the Tactile Knives Bear. Now, first of all, I try to pronounce things correctly, and this one is a real kind of tough one because it is spelled B-E-X-A-R, but it's a county in Texas, and I have heard Bexar, but when you look up examples of people from that area saying this name, it usually just sounds like bear. I think they are saying B-E-H-A-R basically, but with a very little emphasis on that H. So Bexar County. I'm gonna do my best to put that H in there in this review, but I might not always, and I might just say bear. So it is a modern slip joint made in the USA, which is unusual and one of the big draws in itself. And this particular version is a traditional pocket knives or C. Reisner cutlery exclusive with jigging on the handle. And there's other versions. There's some colored versions. There's a like golf ball texture version and all kinds of different things like that. But this version I got because I love traditional knives. I have one other Jigged titanium modern slip joint. This is another traditional pocket knives exclusive. And I really like that Austin at Traditional Pocket Knives is working with these companies to make these modern slip joints with jigging, with Jigged titanium. Because I would hate to see jigging as such a traditional way of finishing a handle on a slip joint kind of go by the wayside with these modern traditionals or modern slip joints that are becoming more and more popular. Now, one thing with this company, Tactile Knives, it actually started as a pen company. So they have a lot of experience in machining. Their background is in machining pens, and they moved into knives. And they've got a couple different models, and this is their only slip joint model. So I've been aware of this model for a long time because it is such a rarity in that it is a slip joint that's modern, that's made in the USA. There are very few of those. There are some. I'm going to show you an example as a comparison. But there are very few, whereas there are a good number of modern slip joints that are higher end that are actually made overseas. And you've seen a lot of my videos, if you watch my videos, on the Jack Wolf knives. Again, the other Traditional Pocket Knives exclusive, the Ohio River Jack, and even some that are made in Europe, like the Lion Steel knives. But there's not that many United States made modern slip joints. So I've been aware of this model for a while because of that. And, you know, it's not an inexpensive knife. It's in the $200 to $300 range. But when I saw that Austin at Traditional Pocket Knives was making this exclusive version with jigging, I just decided to go for it because I've wanted to try it. I wanted to have it to compare to other modern slip joints. And I just really like that it is something that it exists, right? So let's talk about this knife. Now, as I often do with my modern slip joint videos, I like to talk about the pattern first, and this one kind of threw me off. I really wasn't sure what to think of this pattern. It's, you know, kind of strange. It has this straight area on the handle and then a curve to the bolster area. And I realized that I actually think that this is most like a gunstock jack. I don't know if I've ever seen someone say that, but I'm going to give you a couple examples to compare to. Now, unfortunately, the best example that I could have given of my collection, I did get rid of recently, a GEC 44, and there is another GEC pattern. I believe it's the 39, no, not 39, 39 is new. Another pattern that is a gunstock jack that has this more of this shape with a shorter and straight area towards the butt that would be like the shoulder area of the gunstock. But to give you some examples that I do have, here is a Gradation Cutlery number 22 Magnum. And you can see it has, you know, a wider straight area here, then some curve, and then the bolster area. And then here is a really emphasized gunstock jack, the Jack Wolf Knives Sharpshooter Jack. And again, you can see the straight area. It's much longer here on the Sharpshooter Jack, and then a curve towards the bolster. So I think if I was going to, you know, have to nail this bear down to one pattern, I would call it a gunstock jack. So Interesting. It's interesting that they went with a pattern like this. It's not super simple, which I like. They could have just gone with, you know, a very simple jack shape, or, you know, what a lot of companies have gone with, which is kind of just a modern curved handle thing. But they went with kind of a gun stock, so I like that. And then moving on to the blade, it is a really nice classic clip point. I mean, this is a nice looking clip point. I really think that they did a good job with the blade shape. You can see it's got a really nice curve, kind of gradual curve to the actual clip. It's got pretty much a straight spine otherwise, and then some straight area on the edge to match the straight area of the spine, and then a nice general curve up to the tip, which makes for a pretty acute tip. Speaking of the blade here, it seems to be ground really thin. This seems to slice really well, and it's accentuated by the fact that this is a very thin stock knife. This is in GEC territory. So whereas Jack Wolf knives often have a thicker blade stock, I'll show you the thickness of this 22 Magnum, which this is actually the smallest pattern that GEC has made. I guess that's not true anymore. The 06 or something, the keychain knife, I believe, was smaller. But the 22 is one of the smallest patterns. And you can see that the Bear has a blade stock that is very, very similar to this very small GEC. So it definitely has a, wow, this knife needs cleaned off. I must not have cleaned this off before I put it away. Oh man, not what you want to see when you take a knife out for comparison in a video. But this knife, this Bear, really cuts well. With a good grind and a nice thin stock, it cuts really well. Moving on to how the handle actually feels versus just how it looks, it feels good in the hand. I can actually get pretty much a full 4-finger grip on this. I do, you know, go up onto the bolster area, but that's normal. So my kind of 3 first fingers go into the curved area, then my pinky goes onto the flat area, and I can actually get a full 4-finger grip. Although, to truth be said, most of the time when you're using a knife, particularly a slip joint, it's in more of a pinch grip like this, and feels fine in that also. So I'm happy with the ergonomics on this knife. Now the construction is really interesting because, you know, like I said, this Tactile knives, they come from a machining background, and it is interesting to see how that kind of comes to fruition here. So first of all, I love the jigging. I think that they did a really good job. I did see on Facebook where the person who, you know, does the files for the machining said that it took them a long time to get this jigging right. And I do think that they did. I think it looks really nice. I like the jigging on the traditional pocket knives Ohio Riverjack. Certainly a different type of jigging. And I think that this, you know, I do prefer this. I really like how it looks. Both look good, but I think that this one looks a little bit more traditional, a little bit more pocket worn, I would say. The traditional pocket knives Ohio Riverjack looks more like some jigging like this versus an older style jigging. So I really like the jigging on this. And, you know, there's some threading to kind of create the false bolster there. And then there's this circle pattern on the pivot, which seems to be kind of a brand differentiator for Tactile knives. And moving on to the other construction, it's interesting. So if we look at the back spring here, it is not quite like on the Lion Steel modern slip joints, where the spring is like heavily rounded and then the handles are, you know, not rounded, and you can pretty easily feel that edge. So you see that. Now that's a less expensive modern slip joint, made in Italy versus made in the USA, but you can see there it's not perfectly flush from the spring to the handles, like on a, I'll show you the most recent one here, the Venom Jack, like on a Jack Wolf knife. So you can see this is more like a traditional knife, traditionally produced, if well done, slip joint like a GEC, where it's flush between the spring and the liners on the Jack Wolf knives, versus, you know, there is definitely some gaps there, but there's not big gaps. You can't see a lot of light, if any, through there. So it's an interesting kind of step between, again, the lion steel and the Jack Wolf knives. Now again, to compare to a traditional pocket knives exclusive, I would say it's closest to these. Now the back springs are pretty flush to the handles on these Ohio River Jacks, more so than on the Bear, but it's kind of, I guess, the closest comparison. So that's, you know, just an interesting kind of thing that I see with the construction of this knife. Another thing that this knife has that makes it different than some other modern slip joints is it does have a stop pin. So hopefully you can see that stop pin right there, versus the Jack Wolf knives do not. And then the Ohio River Jack does. So you can hear a difference. It doesn't really make a big difference in the actual closing action, but you hear that. Kind of muted, right? Now I'll compare it to pretty different, right? And then back to the Ohio River Jack. So again, I would say that it's somewhere in between, maybe closer to the Ohio River Jack, but definitely muted versus a knife without a stop pin, but it does make it so you don't have to worry about blade wrap. Now, the action otherwise is good. It's easy to pinch this knife open actually, but it does have these kind of interesting double nail nick / long pull things. It's like the size of a nail nick, but made like a long pull. So it's like made to kind of look like a nail nick in that it's a crescent shaped, but it's actually made like how a long pull is. So interesting, you can use that, but it more so just gives you traction to pinch the blade open, I would say. I have only ever used the pinch open method. Now there's no blade play. It came nicely like that, and the action is good. It drops it right about here. So if I press it any more, it drops. It's not perfectly centered. You can see that it is off to this show side, but you know, that's probably the better side for it to be off to, and it doesn't rub. It doesn't really bother me. I think for some people for this price, which these are $229, it might bother you, but for me, it's not a bother. The other thing with this knife is that it is Magna Cut. Magna Cut's a relatively new and very like hyped up steel. Kind of, you know, it's developed by Laren Thomas, who's the knife steel nerd. Supposed to be a really great all-around steel. I've used this knife, but not really enough to really get a feel for the Magna Cut. So I want to do more use with Magna Cut before I talk about it in depth. You can see also that this does come with a lanyard kind of cutout and bar in there. This came with a knife. I might take it off. It's not the fanciest lanyard. I think that this would be better with a different lanyard. So I might try to get a Jigged titanium lanyard pin thing. But you know, it does come with that lanyard hole. So overall, I'm happy with this knife. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention too, you can see that this has a flat area, so it's not going to spin in the handle. I appreciate that. I haven't taken this apart, don't plan to. But overall, I'm really happy with this knife. It's very easy to carry. You can see that it's very thin compared to the Lion Steel, Ohio River Jack. The Ohio River Jacks are hefty. And then a Jack Wolf knives. It's much thinner, easier to carry, although those others are easy enough to carry for me too. The tip sits nice and deep within the handle. You don't have to worry about a proud tip. You don't have to worry about blade wrap. I think this is a really nice knife, and the main thing that I appreciate about it is that it is a made in the USA modern slip joint. It's just something that there's not a lot of, and I'm happy to see. There's the Benchmade proper, not a great knife in my opinion. There's the Kershaw Federalist, which is a completely different thing because it is a double detent slip joint, so not a great comparison. You can see a size comparison there. Not a great comparison in quality or style, but it is another USA made slip joint. But I think that this is more of what I would like to see from USA made modern slip joints. So I'd love to see more of this. I applaud Tactile Knives for doing it, and I have really enjoyed it. So if you'd like to get one, make sure you use my affiliate link to go to Traditional Pocket Knives. And again, thank you to Austin for allowing me to be an affiliate. and for, doing these collaborations with the jigged titanium handles. So if you've enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the bell and select all so you know when I post new videos. Check out my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.